For thousands of years, people have perceived death as the final end of existence. Religious and spiritual teachings promise the continuation of life in another world or rebirth, but science has always remained on the positions of materialism. The classical understanding of death was extremely simple. The body dies, the brain stops functioning, and therefore our consciousness disappears. Everything that was us is dissolving into nothingness. This approach was based on traditional physics, where everything was based on strict laws of causality and ideas about a solid, stable reality. However, with the advent of quantum physics, the usual ideas about reality began to crumble. It turned out that the world is not as solid and predictable as we used to think of it. Studies of microparticles, which make up everything that surrounds us, have shown amazing things. Particles can behave both as waves and as solid objects. Moreover, their behavior changes depending on whether we are watching them or not. This effect was called the uncertainty principle, and it called into question the very existence of objective reality. But what does all this have to do with life after death? It turns out that quantum physics opens up an amazing possibility. Consciousness can be more than just a product of the brain. Some scientists suggest that our consciousness may exist independently of the body. Moreover, if the material world is just an illusion that we create with our perception, is it possible that death is just a transition to another form of existence? In the light of these discoveries, quantum physics is turning into a scientific field that can give hope to those who are looking for answers to the most important questions. What awaits us after the heart stops beating? Where do we end up? And is death really the end? These questions, which until recently seemed exclusively philosophical or religious, are now becoming the subject of scientific discussions. Quantum physics brings us to a stunning conclusion. Perhaps we never die. But to understand this more deeply, you need to understand how reality works and what place consciousness occupies in it. Will science open the door to a new understanding of life and death? Or are we just on the verge of an incredible discovery? For centuries, it has been believed that the world around us is stable and predictable. We live in a reality where every object has a distinct shape, location, and properties. A chair remains a chair, a stone remains a stone, regardless of whether we look at them or not. However, quantum physics has turned this notion upside down. Scientists studying the behavior of elementary particles have drawn conclusions that may shock even the most staunch skeptic. Perhaps the world as we see it exists only at the moment of our observation. The key to these discoveries was the uncertainty principle proposed by Werner Heisenberg in the early 20th century. He argues that it is impossible to accurately determine the position and velocity of an elementary particle at the same time. That is, when we try to find out where a particle is, its velocity becomes uncertain, and vice versa. This effect has made scientists realize that microparticles do not exist in any one state until we look at them. Until the moment of observation, they are in a superposition, a state where they are simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Moreover, experiments with particles, such as the famous double-slit experiment, have shown an even more amazing phenomenon. When particles are passed through two slits and not observed, they behave like waves and create an interference pattern similar to water waves. But as soon as the particles begin to be monitored, they immediately begin to behave like small solid objects. This paradox has raised the question for scientists: what if material reality exists only when we observe it? Some famous physicists have gone even further in their conclusions. John Wheeler, one of the greatest American physicists of the 20th century, hypothesized that the very act of observation creates reality. Before anything was seen, reality was just a multitude of potential options. Wheeler called this phenomenon delayed observation, where a future event can change the past if it is observed. Inspired by this discovery, scientists began to reflect on the nature of reality as such. For example, the famous physicist David Bohm suggested that our world could be something like a hologram. In his opinion, each part of the holographic image contains information about the whole. It's the same in our world. Every piece of reality can contain all the information about the universe. And if the world is truly holographic, then death may simply be a transition to another level of reality, hidden from us by ordinary perception. The idea that the universe is a program also finds its supporters. Nick Bostrom, a philosopher and professor at Oxford University, suggested that we can all live in a huge simulation. He believes that with the development of technology in the future, a highly developed civilization can create a reality that will be indistinguishable from the real one. If this is the case, then death may simply be an exit from the simulation or the loading of a new level of consciousness. All this sounds like fiction, but modern experiments and theories give grounds for such assumptions. If reality really exists only at the moment of observation, then our consciousness plays a key role in its creation. This means that death may not be the end of existence, but only a change in the form of perception. Death has always been perceived as the moment when consciousness ceases to exist. However, modern scientists are beginning to wonder, what if our consciousness does not disappear along with the body? Quantum physics suggests that consciousness may not just be a product of the brain, but something deeper and more fundamental. This assumption leads to new theories about immortality that could completely change our understanding of life and death. One of the most daring theories in this field is biocentrism, proposed by American biologist and scientist Robert Lanza. Lanza argues that consciousness plays a central role in shaping reality. In his opinion, everything that we see, feel, and perceive as reality exists only because our consciousness created it. In other words, the world around us is not an independent structure, but a product of our perception. Lanza concludes that if consciousness creates reality, then it cannot disappear after the death of the body. According to his theory, death is not the end, but a transition to another form of existence, where consciousness continues its game in another reality. Lanza compares death to waking up from a dream. The body remains behind, but consciousness continues its journey. It's like changing channels on a TV. The signal continues to exist even if one channel is turned off. Another amazing idea that is gaining popularity in scientific circles is a multi-world interpretation of quantum physics. According to this hypothesis, proposed by physicist Hugh Everett, every choice and every event creates a new universe. For example, if you stand at an intersection and choose to go left, then one reality is created in the universe where you made this decision. But in the universe where you went to the right, another reality appears. Thus, there are countless parallel worlds, each of which develops according to its own scenario. How does this relate to life after death? Some scientists suggest that at the moment of death, we simply transition into another version of reality. In one universe, your body may cease to exist, but your consciousness continues to live in another reality, where death has not occurred. This explanation, although it sounds fantastic, is based on mathematical models of quantum mechanics. Quantum experiments have also shown that consciousness can actively influence the material world. One of the most famous experiments is the observer effect, when particles change their behavior depending on whether they are being watched or not. This suggests that consciousness has the ability to change physical reality. If this is the case, then our perception may be the key to creating new realities even after physical death. Some scientists go even further, suggesting that consciousness may be a kind of energy field that is indestructible and exists outside of time and space. Such a field can continue to exist even if the body is no longer functioning. This idea is supported by proponents of information theory, who believe that information, which we call consciousness, cannot simply disappear. It must be preserved in some form. Quantum entanglement is one of the most mysterious and amazing phenomena of quantum physics. The essence of this phenomenon lies in the fact that two particles, once entangled with each other, remain connected regardless of the distance between them. Even if one particle is sent to the other end of the universe, the changes that occur to it will instantly affect its entangled partner. This phenomenon doesn't just puzzle scientists, it violates all the laws of classical physics and calls into question the very concept of space and time. But what if quantum entanglement can explain the connection between the world of the living and the otherworldly? Could it be the key to understanding what happens to consciousness after death? Let's start with why quantum entanglement surprises scientists so much. Imagine that you have two coins that can fall either heads or tails. Under normal conditions, the result of each coin toss will be independent. However, if the coins are entangled in a quantum way, then the result of one roll will immediately determine the result of the other. That is, if one coin falls heads, the second one will instantly show tails, regardless of the distance between them. The most incredible thing about this is that the signal between the particles is transmitted faster than the speed of light, which violates Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein called this phenomenon creepy action at a distance and considered it impossible. However, experiments have repeatedly proved the reality of entanglement. Moreover, modern scientists continue to explore this phenomenon, trying to understand its nature and possible applications in quantum technologies. Now, imagine that our consciousness or soul may also possess the properties of quantum entanglement. There is a theory that the human brain can be a kind of quantum system in which neurons interact at the level of elementary particles. If this is the case, then at the death of the body, the quantum information that made up our consciousness may continue to exist in the form of entangled particles. This leads to the question, is it possible to transfer information after death? Some scientists suggest that if the particles associated with our consciousness remain entangled with other particles, then the connection between them can continue even after the death of the body. This may explain the phenomena that people associate with the afterlife: visions of deceased loved ones, a sense of their presence, unexplained signs and synchronicities. The phenomenon of near-death experience may also be related to quantum entanglement, which will be discussed in more detail later. Some people who have experienced clinical death talk about how they saw events taking place in other rooms or even in other places. If consciousness really has the ability to instantly move, thanks to quantum processes, then such stories may not just be a fantasy or an illusion of the brain. Moreover, there are hypotheses that consciousness may be part of a global quantum field in which all beings are entangled with each other. In this case, death does not mean disappearance. It is just a transition to another form of existence in this field. Perhaps this explains the phenomena of contact with the dead, which are described in different cultures and religions. Some philosophers and scientists suggest that if consciousness is connected to a quantum field, then it can exist outside of time and space. This means that consciousness can interact with the world of the living, even after the death of the body. Communication between entangled particles can be a way of transferring information or energy between different levels of reality. Since ancient times, people have told stories about reincarnation, the transmigration of a soul from one body to another after death. These stories were perceived as myths or religious beliefs rather than scientific fact. However, with the emergence of many documented cases, especially among children, scientists began to wonder, what if there is more to these stories? One of the most striking examples is the stories of children who suddenly start remembering events and people they couldn't possibly know. Dr. Ian Stevenson, a renowned American psychiatrist, has devoted decades of his life to researching such cases. He documented more than 2,500 stories of children from all over the world who claimed to remember their past lives. In some cases, the children described details from the lives of deceased people, including the names, places, and circumstances of their deaths. For example, in India, there was a case of a boy who claimed to have been stabbed in his previous life. He accurately described the crime scene and identified his killer. Moreover, there were birthmarks on his body that matched the wounds on the deceased's body. The investigation confirmed the boy's words, which baffled the scientists. How to explain such phenomena? Some scientists suggest that this may be the result of genetic memory or the collective unconscious. However, quantum physics offers a different approach. If consciousness is really a part of the global quantum field, then it can persist after the death of the body and be transferred to a new one. In this case, memories of past lives could be traces of the very entanglement that quantum theories talk about. The phenomenon of near-death experience is no less mysterious. People who have experienced clinical death often talk about similar experiences: the feeling of leaving the body, moving through a tunnel to the light, meeting dead loved ones, and feeling endless love and peace. These experiences are so vivid and realistic that many people change their attitudes towards life and death after returning to life. Classical medicine has long explained near-death experiences as the result of oxygen starvation of the brain. However, this theory cannot explain some of the key features of these experiences. For example, there are documented cases where people who were in a state of clinical death described events and conversations that took place in another room. This phenomenon, called out-of-body perception, remains a mystery to science. Quantum physics can provide a new explanation for this phenomenon. If consciousness can really exist outside the body, then leaving the body during a near-death experience may not be a hallucination, but a real quantum process. Perhaps our consciousness detaches from our physical body and temporarily gains freedom of movement, like entangled quantum particles that can instantly interact over vast distances. Some researchers go even further, suggesting that during near-death experiences, consciousness can connect to the global information field of the universe. This may explain the feelings of omniscience and oneness with the world described by people who have experienced near-death experiences. In this state, they can access information that is not available in everyday life. Modern research also shows that many people who have experienced near-death experiences begin to possess unusual abilities. They report increased intuition, anticipation of future events, and even the appearance of healing abilities. This may also be related to quantum processes that are activated in extreme states of consciousness. Quantum physics continues to challenge our understanding of reality, and its discoveries increasingly raise one of the most fundamental questions: what is death? If classical science has long considered death as a final and irreversible process, then quantum mechanics offers a completely different view. This new understanding is based on the idea that reality may be informational rather than material. We already know that particles at the subatomic level do not exist in fixed states until they are observed. This leads to the conclusion that reality itself may not be solid and permanent, but only an illusion created by our perception. If we apply this principle to the concept of consciousness, an intriguing hypothesis arises. Perhaps our consciousness is not a product of the brain, but a separate phenomenon that exists independently of the physical body. The death of the body in this case does not mean the destruction of consciousness. Instead, can detach from the physical shell and move into a different state of existence. One of the most famous proponents of this theory is Dr. Robert Lanza, who put forward the theory of biocentrism. Lanza argues that death is just an illusion created by our limited perception of three-dimensional reality. According to his theory, consciousness shapes reality, not the other way around. This means that after the death of the physical body, consciousness continues to exist in another form or even in another universe. The idea of consciousness existing outside the physical body is also supported by experiments in the field of quantum entanglement. If particles can instantly interact with each other at any distance, then why shouldn't consciousness have the same properties? Perhaps consciousness is a quantum phenomenon that does not depend on space and time. Near-death experiences, cases of memories of past lives, unexplained phenomena, all this may be a reflection of deeper quantum processes that we are just beginning to understand. Moreover, if our consciousness is really able to interact with the global information field of the universe, then death may simply be a transition to this field, where all knowledge and experiences continue to exist forever. However, despite all these intriguing hypotheses, there are still many open questions. How exactly does consciousness interact with physical reality? Is it ever possible to prove the existence of consciousness outside the body using scientific methods? If the immortality of consciousness is possible, then what does this mean for our understanding of life and death? Scientists are already beginning to develop new research methods that can shed light on these issues. Some of them try to measure the energy leaving the body at the moment of death. Others are exploring the possibilities of quantum computing for modeling consciousness processes. New theories are also emerging that our brain may be a quantum computer capable of processing information beyond ordinary time and space. What does the future hold for us? Perhaps in the coming decades, science will make a breakthrough that will change our understanding of life and death forever. Maybe we will finally find evidence that consciousness is truly immortal and continues to exist even after the death of the body. And if this is the case, then death will cease to be a frightening ending, but will only become a transition to a new state of being. The immortality of consciousness can become a new scientific paradigm that will change everything from our attitude to life to the ethical and philosophical foundations of our society. We are now on the verge of a great discovery. Quantum physics has already shown us that the universe is much more complex and mysterious than we could have imagined. And if we continue to look for answers, then perhaps one day we will be able to understand the very essence of life, death, and immortality.